It all started when I decided I needed a break from my busy life. Work had been stressful, and I hadn't taken a vacation in over a year. I wanted somewhere quiet, cozy, and affordable. A place where I could relax, read a book, and maybe even go for a hike if the weather was nice. That's when I found the perfect Airbnb listing. The photos showed a small, modern apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It had a comfortable-looking bed, a clean kitchen, and a little balcony with a view of the trees. The reviews were mostly positive, with people saying things like, "Great place to unwind," and "The host was very friendly and helpful." I didn't think twice. I booked it for a long weekend. When I arrived, everything seemed fine. The apartment was exactly as it looked in the photos. The host, a man named John, greeted me at the door. He was in his late 30s, with a friendly smile and a casual demeanor. He showed me around the apartment, pointed out the Wi-Fi password, and even left a small welcome basket with snacks and a bottle of wine. I thought, this is going to be a great weekend. After John left, I unpacked my bags and settled in. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the balcony, and enjoyed the peaceful surroundings. The apartment was quiet, just like I wanted. I felt relaxed for the first time in months. That evening, I cooked a simple dinner in the kitchen and watched a movie on my laptop. Everything felt normal. I went to bed around 11 p.m., tired from the day's travel. The bed was comfortable and I fell asleep almost immediately. But something felt off when I woke up the next morning. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I had this strange feeling, like I was being watched. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. Maybe I was still half asleep. Later that day, I went out to explore the area. There was a small park nearby, and I spent a couple of hours walking around and enjoying the fresh air. When I got back to the apartment, I noticed something strange. The furniture in the bedroom looked slightly different. The chair near the desk was moved a few inches to the left, and the pillows on the bed were arranged differently. I thought, did I do that? Maybe I bumped into the chair when I was getting ready this morning. But I couldn't remember touching it. I started to feel uneasy. That night, I decided to double-check the locks on the doors and windows. Everything seemed secure. I tried to shake off the weird feeling and went to bed. But as I was lying there, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the smoke detector on the ceiling, there was a tiny red light. It was blinking, almost like a heartbeat. At first, I thought it was part of the smoke detector, but something about it didn't seem right. I got out of bed and stood on a chair to get a closer look. My heart started racing when I realized what it was. A tiny camera, hidden inside the smoke detector. It was pointed directly at the bed. I felt sick to my stomach. Someone had been watching me this whole time. I grabbed my phone and called the police. While I waited for them to arrive, I packed my bags and tried to stay calm. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. When the police arrived, they inspected the camera and confirmed that it was real. They also found another one in the bathroom, hidden inside a fake air freshener. I felt violated, like my privacy had been completely invaded. The police called John, the host, and asked him to come to the apartment. When he arrived, he acted surprised and denied knowing anything about the cameras. But the police weren't convinced. They searched his phone and found footage from the cameras, including recordings of me sleeping and getting ready in the morning. John finally admitted to installing the cameras. He said he did it to keep an eye on the apartment and claimed he never meant to hurt anyone, but that didn't make me feel any better. I couldn't believe I had trusted him. The police arrested John, and I left the apartment that night. I stayed in a hotel for the rest of the weekend, but I couldn't relax. I kept thinking about the cameras and wondering how many other people had been recorded without their knowledge. When I got home, I reported the incident to Airbnb. They were apologetic and refunded my money, but it didn't make up for what had happened. I also left a detailed review warning other guests about the hidden cameras. The experience changed the way I think about renting places online. Now, I always check for cameras when I stay somewhere new. I use a small device that detects hidden cameras, and I make sure to read reviews carefully before booking anything. Looking back, I realized there were a few red flags I should have noticed. For example, John was a little too friendly when I arrived, and he kept asking personal questions about where I was from and what I did for work. At the time, I thought he was just being nice, but now I see it as a warning sign. I also learned how important it is to trust your instincts. That strange feeling I had on the first morning was my gut telling me something was wrong. I wish I had listened to it sooner. Most of all, I learned that privacy is something we can't take for granted. Even in a place that seems safe, there's always a chance that someone could be watching. It's a scary thought, but it's something we need to be aware of. It took me a while to feel comfortable traveling again after what happened. But I didn't want to let one bad experience ruin my love for exploring new places. Now, I take extra precautions to protect my privacy and safety. I always bring a portable door lock when I stay in a rental, and I cover any devices that could have cameras like TVs and smoke detectors. I also make sure to let someone know where I'm staying and check in with them regularly. The experience was terrifying, but it taught me valuable lessons about staying safe and trusting my instincts. I hope my story can help others avoid going through something similar. I had been driving for hours. My back was sore, and my eyes felt heavy from staring at the road for so long. When I finally pulled into the driveway of my Airbnb, I let out a sigh of relief. The small apartment looked cozy, just like in the pictures. It was part of a larger house, but the host had assured me it had a private entrance, and I wouldn't have to interact with anyone. I parked my car, grabbed my suitcase, and walked up to the door. The host had left the key under the doormat, just as they had promised. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The place was warm, clean, and smelled like fresh laundry. It was simple, just a small living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. Perfect for a short stay. I tossed my bag on the floor and stretched my arms. I was exhausted. All I wanted was a hot shower and a good night's sleep. After showering, I changed into my pajamas and got into bed. The mattress was soft, and the blankets were warm. I sighed in comfort, already feeling my body relax. Then I heard it, a soft noise, almost like breathing. I held my breath and listened. Maybe it was the heater or the pipes. Old houses make noises sometimes. I turned on my side, pulling the blanket over me, and closed my eyes. But the sound didn't stop. It was slow, steady breathing, and it was coming from inside the room. A chill ran down my spine. My heart began to race. Was someone in here with me? I sat up in bed and looked around. The door was still locked. The windows were closed. I was alone, but the breathing was still there. I swallowed hard and turned on the bedside lamp. The dim light filled the room. Everything looked normal. My suitcase was where I had left it. The chair by the window was empty, and the door to the bathroom was slightly ajar. Then my eyes landed on the closet. It was closed, but something about it felt wrong. I told myself I was being silly. Maybe I was just hearing my own breath and getting scared for no reason. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I decided to ignore it. I turned off the lamp, pulled the blanket over my head, and forced myself to sleep. The next day, I explored the town, grabbed some coffee, and did some work on my laptop. By the time I returned to the Airbnb, it was already dark. I made myself some dinner and watched TV for a while before heading to bed. As I lay there, I listened carefully. Silence.
No strange breathing. No weird noises.
Maybe I had imagined it last night. Then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard something new. A soft creaking sound, like wood shifting under pressure. I opened my eyes and looked toward the closet. My heart skipped a beat. The closet door was slightly open. I knew I had closed it earlier. My pulse pounded in my ears. I slowly sat up, my body tense. Should I check? Should I just leave the apartment? I took a deep breath and swung my legs over the bed. Slowly, I walked toward the closet. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. I counted to 3 in my head, then yanked the door open. Nothing, just clothes hanging neatly on hangers. A couple of extra blankets on the top shelf. An empty suitcase at the bottom. I let out a nervous laugh. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly, and the wind from the heater had pushed it open. That had to be it. I closed the closet door firmly, making sure it clicked shut, then went back to bed. But that night, I didn't sleep well. By the 3rd night, I was ready to leave. I still had one more night left on my booking, but something about the apartment made me uneasy. I couldn't explain it. Maybe I was just tired and overthinking things. Still, I decided to sleep with the lamp on just in case. As I lay in bed, I kept glancing at the closet. I told myself it was just a piece of furniture, nothing to be afraid of. Then, around midnight, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A quiet shuffling noise. It was coming from inside the closet. I sat up so fast that my heart nearly stopped. My breath came in short gasps. Someone was in there. I stared at the closet door, my mind racing. What should I do? Run? Call the police? Then, before I could move, the door creaked open slowly, and I saw him, a man, standing inside the closet. His eyes were wide, his face pale and thin. He looked just as shocked as I was. He was barefoot, wearing old, tattered clothes. We stared at each other for a few seconds, both frozen in fear. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he said, "Please, don't tell them I'm here." 5. The escape. I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I bolted out of bed and ran for the door. My hands fumbled with the lock as I heard movement behind me. The man was stepping out of the closet. I wrenched the door open and sprinted outside, slamming the door behind me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and grabbed my phone. My fingers were shaking as I dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes. I stayed in my car, watching as they entered the apartment. When they came back out, their faces were grim. There was a small hidden space behind the closet wall, one officer told me. It looks like someone had been living there for a while. I felt sick. I wanted to throw up. The worst part? The host swore they had no idea. I left immediately, not even bothering to grab my suitcase. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as possible. I never found out who the man was. The police said he might have been a squatter, someone who had found a way into the house and had been secretly living there. But the way he looked at me, the way he begged me not to tell anyone, made me wonder if there was something more to it. Had the host really not known? Or had they been hiding something? I'll never know. And honestly, I don't want to. I haven't used Airbnb since. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Work had been stressful and I needed a break. A few days alone in a quiet cabin sounded perfect. No emails, no phone calls, just peace and nature. The Airbnb listing showed a beautiful wooden cabin surrounded by tall trees. It looked cozy, simple, and exactly what I needed. The host had great reviews and the price was affordable. I booked it without thinking twice. The drive to the cabin was long but beautiful. The road twisted through thick forests, and sunlight filtered through the trees. There were no other houses nearby, just miles of quiet wilderness. When I finally arrived, the cabin looked just like the pictures. It was small but charming, with a wooden porch, a stone chimney, and big windows. There was a fire pit outside and a little path leading to a nearby lake. I parked my car, grabbed my bags, and walked up to the door. The key was exactly where the host had said it would be, under a small rock near the steps. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was warm and welcoming. The smell of wood filled the air. The furniture was rustic but comfortable. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, and a cozy bedroom with a thick quilt on the bed. I smiled. This was going to be a perfect weekend. After unpacking, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The sun was setting, and the forest looked golden. Everything was peaceful. As night fell, I lit a fire in the fireplace and curled up with a book. The warmth of the fire made me sleepy, so I decided to go to bed early. The cabin was completely silent. No cars, no people, just the sound of the wind in the trees. Felt good to be so far from everything. I crawled into bed, pulled the thick quilt over me, and closed my eyes. Then I heard it, a whisper. At first I thought I imagined it. I held my breath and listened. The room was quiet again. Maybe it was just the wind. But then I heard it again. A soft, low voice. I sat up in bed, my heart beating faster. The whisper was coming from inside the walls. I told myself it was just the old wood settling, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there. I turned on the bedside lamp and stared at the walls. Everything looked normal. Maybe I was just tired, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling. I turned off the light and pulled the blankets up to my chin. I didn't sleep well that night. In the morning, the whispering was gone. I convinced myself it had been a dream. I spent the day exploring the forest and taking pictures. The air was fresh, the lake was beautiful, and for a while, I felt relaxed again. By the time I returned to the cabin, the sun was setting. I made myself dinner and sat by the fire, listening to the crackling flames. Everything felt peaceful again. Then, just as I was finishing my meal, I heard it, the whispering. It was faint, but this time I could hear words. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. The voices were muffled, like they were coming from inside the walls. I slowly stood up, my pulse racing. "Who is she?" one voice whispered. "She doesn't belong here," another voice replied. My breath caught in my throat. I turned off the fire and backed away from the wall. The whispering stopped. I grabbed my phone and checked for a signal. Nothing. No bars, no Wi-Fi. The host had mentioned the cabin didn't have service, but I suddenly hated being so cut off. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me because I was alone. Trying to shake off the fear, I locked the doors, grabbed a flashlight, and checked every corner of the cabin. Nothing was out of place. I was alone. At least I hoped I was. That night I kept the lamp on. I lay in bed, listening. For a long time, everything was quiet. The only sound was the wind outside. Then, around midnight, the whispering started again. This time it was closer. I held my breath, my body frozen. The voices were right behind the wall next to my bed. "She's still here," one voice said. "Why won't she leave?" another voice whispered. A cold wave of fear washed over me. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. Then came the scratching, soft at first, like nails dragging against the wood. Then it grew louder, desperate, clawing. My heart pounded in my chest. I threw off the blankets and grabbed my flashlight. I aimed the beam at the wall. Nothing, just wood. But the scratching didn't stop. I jumped out of bed and ran to the living room. My hands shook as I grabbed my car keys. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. I was leaving, but just as I reached the door, the whispering changed. It was no longer muffled. It was right behind me. "Stay." I felt hot breath on the back of my neck. I screamed and bolted out of the cabin. The night was freezing, but I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to unlock the door. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. My headlights lit up the cabin, and for a second, I thought I saw something in the window. A shadow, a figure, watching me. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped down the dark road. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town. I found a small motel and checked in. The man at the front desk raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Barefoot, shaking, my face pale. I didn't care. I just needed to be far away from that place. The next morning, I called the Airbnb host and told them what happened. They laughed nervously and said, "You're not the first guest to say that." My stomach dropped. Apparently, other guests had heard things too. Whispering, scratching voices. Some even claimed to have seen shadows moving inside the cabin. The host insisted there was nothing to worry about, but I didn't believe them. I left my review short and simple. Something is wrong with this cabin. Do not stay here. Later, I did some research. The cabin had belonged to a woman who had lived alone for years. One day, she disappeared. No one knew what happened to her. The only thing left behind was her empty house. Some say she never really left. And after my stay, I believe them. I had been traveling for hours. My flight was delayed, my luggage was heavy, and I was exhausted. All I wanted was to check into my Airbnb, take a hot shower, and sleep. The apartment I booked was in a nice part of town. The host had great reviews, and the pictures looked perfect. Clean, modern, and cozy. The price was reasonable, too. It seemed like the perfect place for my short trip. When I arrived at the building, it was already late at night. The street was quiet, and most of the windows were dark. I followed the instructions the host had sent me, found the lockbox near the door, and took out the key. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. The elevator was old and slow, so I decided to take the stairs. My suitcase bumped against each step as I climbed, making the only sound in the empty stairwell. When I reached the door, I unlocked it and stepped inside. The apartment was just like the pictures. A small living room with a gray couch, a coffee table, and a TV. A tiny kitchen with white cabinets. A single bedroom with a neatly made bed. Felt warm and welcoming. But as I closed the door behind me, a strange feeling crept over me, like I was being watched. I shook off the thought. I was just tired. I locked the door, set down my suitcase, and headed straight for the bathroom. That's when I noticed the mirror. The bathroom was small but clean. A white sink, a toilet, a glass shower, and above the sink, a large mirror. As I reached for the faucet, I glanced at my reflection, and I froze. My reflection wasn't moving. My heart stopped. I blinked. The figure in the mirror blinked too. Maybe I was just too tired. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. I waved my hand. My reflection did the same. I let out a nervous laugh. I was imagining things. I turned on the water, splashed my face, and tried to shake off the strange feeling. But as I wiped my face with a towel, I felt something. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, like I wasn't alone. I glanced at the mirror again. My reflection stood still, staring at me. I turned and ran out of the bathroom, shutting the door behind me. I didn't go back into the bathroom. I didn't even change into my pajamas. I just crawled into bed and pulled the blankets up to my chin. The apartment was silent, too silent. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying what I saw. Was it just my imagination? Was I too tired to think straight? Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Something felt off. The room was dark, but a faint glow came from the bathroom door. The light was on. I knew I had turned it off. My chest tightened. My breath came in short gasps. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but my eyes were drawn to the mirror in the bathroom. I could barely see it from the bed, but there was something in the reflection. A shape, a figure, me, standing in front of the sink. But I was still in bed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't listen. The figure in the mirror was still. It wasn't brushing its hair or washing its face. It was just standing there, watching me. Then slowly it smiled. A sick, Twisted grins spread across its face. Its head tilted to one side, as if amused. I choked back a scream. The light in the bathroom flickered. Then the figure in the mirror took a step forward. But not into the bathroom. Into my room. That was enough. I jumped out of bed and ran for the door. My hands fumbled with the lock, shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. Behind me, I felt something move. I didn't look back. I wrenched the door open and ran out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded as I stood there, gasping for breath. I didn't care that I was in my pajamas, barefoot in a strange building in the middle of the night. I just needed to get out. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping in my panic. When I reached the front door, I threw it open and ran outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap. But I wasn't safe yet. I turned back to look at the apartment window, and I saw it. A shadow stood in the window, watching me, still smiling. I didn't go back. I didn't even bother to text the host. I found a cheap motel and stayed there for the rest of my trip. I slept with the lights on, jumping at every little sound. The next morning, I got a notification from AIRBNB, a message from the host. "Did you leave early? My neighbor said they saw someone standing in your window all night." I deleted the app. I never used Airbnb again. I needed a place to stay for a few months. My job had sent me to a new city, and I didn't want to live in a hotel. So, I searched for a long-term Airbnb rental. That's when I found it. A small, old house in a quiet neighborhood. The price was low, and the pictures looked nice. The host's reviews were good, too. People said the house was charming and peaceful. I booked it immediately. When I arrived, the host, an older man named Mr. Benson, was waiting for me outside. He gave me the keys and a friendly smile. "It's an old house," he said. "Might make some noises at night, but nothing to worry about." I nodded, not thinking much of it. Inside, the house was cozy. Wooden floors, old furniture, and a big fireplace in the living room. Smelled like books and fresh wood. I loved it. But then, I noticed something strange. A locked door in the hallway. At first, I didn't think much about it. Old houses had storage rooms, right? Maybe the owner kept cleaning supplies in there. But something about the door bothered me. It was different from the others. While all the other doors had old brass handles, this one had a newer lock. The kind you needed a key for. I asked Mr. Benson about it the next day. "Oh, that," he said, waving his hand. "Just an old storage room. Nothing interesting in there." I nodded. But deep inside, something told me he was lying. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about the door. Sometimes, when I walked past it, I thought I heard something behind it. A soft shuffling sound, like something moving inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, my mind replaying the sound I heard earlier. Then, just as I started drifting off, I heard it, a soft thump. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. It came from the hallway, near the locked door. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I stepped into the hallway. The house was silent, too silent. I held my breath and listened. Thump. I nearly dropped my phone. The sound had come from inside the locked room. Something was in there. The next morning, I searched the house for a key. I didn't know why. Maybe I was just being nosy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know what was behind that door. I checked drawers, shelves, even under furniture. Then, in the kitchen, I found an old wooden box. Inside, there were some papers, old receipts, and at the bottom, a key. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Was this the key to the locked door? I should have left it alone. I should have put it back and forgotten about it. But I didn't. That night, when everything was quiet, I crept to the hallway. I held the key in my sweaty hand, my heart beating fast. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. Click. The door creaked open. The air inside was cold. Dust floated in the dim light of my phone's flashlight. I took a shaky step inside. It was a small room.
No furniture. No windows.
Just 4 walls. And in the corner, a bed. A small, dirty mattress. And next to it, chains. My breath caught in my throat. The chains were attached to the wall with handcuffs at the ends. What the hell was this place? Then I saw something else. Faint scratch marks on the walls, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I stumbled backward, my chest tight with panic. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper. Help me. I ran out of the room and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking as I locked it again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Mr. Benson. There's something in that locked room, I said, my voice shaking. There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then he sighed. You opened it, didn't you? I didn't answer. Mr. Benson finally spoke. A long time ago, a woman lived in that house. Her husband kept her locked in that room. No one knew until it was too late. She died in there. I felt sick. I packed my bags and left immediately. As I drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. And in the hallway window, I saw her, watching me, still waiting for someone to help her.